Welcome, everybody, to episode number 2 of the Pick Six podcast with my good friend Drake over here at Drake's PC. I am DPZ, and we are coming to you to talk about sports cards. We have some pretty great questions that were posed to Drake and myself, mostly Drake, because Drake asked for some questions and feedback some things you wanted us to talk about today. So we were armed and ready for that. We also want to speak to some of the comments from our last video. Great engagement. Thank you so much for doing that. Makes it fun for us. And we also have a couple of things we might want to talk about. But first, Drake, I'm going to give it to you, buddy. I feel like that first episode went really well. We got some great feedback, and we got some terrific support from some of our friends in the hobby, which we're very grateful to have.
Yes, absolutely. But before we get to that, Dennis, folks may notice that I have a different background this week. I'm not in Arkansas. I'm at a Holiday Inn Express in Henrietta, Oklahoma. So what I was going to ask, because I'm sure you know the answer, maybe so, maybe not, but I was going to ask for someone in the comments, what Super Bowl winning quarterback is from Henrietta, Oklahoma? So somebody throw that in the comments, and we'll see the first one that gets it right without using Google. Everybody can use Google, Wikipedia, and all that. But try to figure out which Super Bowl winning quarterback is from Henrietta, Oklahoma.
I like that.
Anyways, yeah, no, there's not many. So, and I'll give you just a hint. He played for a pro team that's just south of here. We'll just leave it at that. So, anyways. I look forward to the person that makes the comment. So anyways, but no, did want to say thank you to everyone for the engagement on episode 1. It was awesome. I appreciate the positive comments that several folks gave me through direct messages, things like that. As of the time of this recording, which is only like 3 days after the first episode was released, we've had over 30 comments on the recording. And I wanted to give a great shout out to the folks that commented on that. And I apologize in advance if I butcher your name. It's not on purpose. But I want to give a shout out to Pick Six Cards, TJ Cloutier, we'll give the French pronunciation, Scout 7788, Schmo 5070, Ziggy No, PK 3739, Gene Paltari 7187, Kamikaze Sports Card Hybrid 6243, Ryan RA 44, Malia Chapman, 7162, St. Doe's Cards 1, Corey Williamson, 2778, Oran Card, 4443, and Game Time Gallery, 7661. So thank you all for commenting, for the engagement on the video as well. That means a lot to us. So we certainly appreciate that and welcome the continued engagement and conversations from the future videos. But I also want to give a huge shout out as well to Chris McGill, Chris Hoge, as people know him, for giving our show, episode 1, a shout out on last Friday night's crossover. So thank you, Chris. Thank you to the team, as well as Brett McGrath from Stacking Slabs as well, for giving us a shout out on his show as well. So thank you all both. But once again, appreciate all of that from everybody. And so, yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, we got Midlife Crisis Cards also gave us some love. I appreciate that as well. He's been on he was on the Luca Tiger Braun podcast a while back and had a terrific episode. Gosh, you can go back and find it. He speaks to some things that are really important right now. Going back and listening to that episode would be wise. He's a Midlife Crisis Cards, a great follow on Instagram, great collector, and he's got a great position in the hobby. So thank you all for all those wonderful comments. But now we have a new episode. And what do you want to do first here, Drake?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing we want to do is, as you mentioned, I did post a story on Instagram and asking for feedback for show topics, right? Because folks want to know a lot more than what you and I can think up in our brains, right? And so the first topic that came in that we wanted to bring up this week, first of all, I do want to say I do appreciate all the engagement on that. I said we would just pick one. We decided to pick 2. And we have several more for future shows and things like that. And that may be something that I do each week, right? Because hobby topics change sometimes by the minute, but most time by the day or the week. So I appreciate the engagement. So we picked 2. The first one is from sports_cards 0711. And he asked, if card prices went down to pre-COVID levels, would you still collect? So what do you think, DPZ?
Um, I think so at this point. I think I'd be pretty sad for the amount of money I spend on some of the cards, but I still love the cards I have, and I think the cards that I've curated to this point, that I've whittled down to and consolidated to at this point, are cards that I enjoy. They're rare cards, or cards that are hard to find. That were still hard to find pre-COVID. If I still would have had some of the cards that were more prevalent and popular during the earlier part of my collecting journey, I might have been. I wouldn't have been, but I think with the cards I have now, I'd be very happy still owning them and collecting them. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I'm kind of unique, I guess, in that I returned to the hobby full time pre-COVID, right? So I came back in 2019 and that sort of thing. But what I found myself is I was kind of following the herd in those pre-COVID times a little bit, kind of 2019 and early 2020, and that sort of stuff. And so, like when COVID happened, that's when I transitioned from being kind of a follow the herd, buy what the talking heads are really telling you to buy, and things like that. And I really focused on my collection, right? And so there's several cards that I bought during COVID that if they came for sale today would probably be a lot cheaper than what I paid for them. But you know what? Some of those cards, my purchase was the last sale of that card. And so I sometimes struggle with that because I'm like, man, I paid a lot of money for that Peyton Manning 2007 Bowman Chrome Gold Refractor PSA 10. But you know what? Not a single one is sold since then. So it's like, did I pay too much? Did I pay too little? I really don't know. But and that's the thing I think that's nice to me is you as a collector, you just have to ride those waves. Like nobody's going to time every market perfectly and things like that. And so I think it was just nice that I collected way before COVID. I collected as a kid through high school, kind of early college, kind of dipped my toes into it kind of in my early career and just getting married life and things like that. And then really returned kind of pre-COVID. And so, yeah, for me, I mean, the price surge and that sort of thing, it actually gave me more anxiety than most people because I'm one of those people that I don't like these wild swings up and down. And like, yeah, it was really cool to buy a card and, by the time it hits your front door, it's doubled in value and then you could sell it or do whatever you want to. But like, that just gave me a lot of anxiety. And that's just not the way that my mind operates as a collector. I'm more of kind of the slow and stable type thing is kind of what fits my personality well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got in at the fall of 2019 myself, and right before the boom, and I was just looking to pick up Ken Griffey Jr. cards. I picked up like 3 or 4, and I was like, okay, I've got enough for each one of my children to pass down. This is a cool autographed, just a basic autographed Ken Griffey Jr. card slabbed by BGS. I figured that was the coolest thing, not knowing there's so many out there. And I picked up a BGS 9 89 Upper Deck. That's what I really wanted as well. I wanted to own one of those cards again. I went back and started looking at my cards. I had a conversation with a collector a few months before 2020. So I was right in the beginning, which is kind of weird how a lot of us sort of got that itch right before all that happened. It's really odd. I wasn't one of them that I stopped working and all of a sudden I was working through the whole downturn. But yeah, obviously I started listening to sports card content. I'd never done that before. But there's a part of me that kind of wonders too, is like if I would have bought the cards I have, all the cards I have right now, if I would have spent the money on the cards I have now back then, how much further ahead I'd be. A lot further ahead. There are some cards I probably would have had a hard time getting a hold of because I'd have to know people within the community, the collecting community, the specific player collector community, and understand what cards are important. I would have known that, and it would have taken a long time to learn that. So the journey was very important, don't get me wrong. But I bought and sold so many cards since then. And now I'm to the point where I just keep trying to like color up and get it to that right, okay, the dream card. These cards start coming available in the last couple of years that I never thought I'd see. So it kind of forces you to go, okay, wait, now I need to sell to get that. So I find myself doing that a lot. But ultimately, I always wonder, like, okay, but would I've been comfortable spending the amount of money that would have cost to get these cards back then? I probably would have been no way. No way. So it took buying and building up a collection and having the capital to sell, to use to buy the cards versus using cash, because I could never imagine taking just a big chunk of cash and going and buying that card. That's hard for me to do. It's almost like card capital feels different for some reason. Even though it is cash, it feels different. So it's a really interesting thing to think about pre-COVID, post-COVID. If the numbers went back down, would you still want the cards? I just feel like that at this point in time, the cards that I have, they're so cool in my opinion. They're so carefully collected and selected that, you know, I still would want them. Mm-hmm. I probably would have some heartache over how much they're worth versus how much I'd spent to acquire them at this point. But again, I feel like that's why I want to keep going. If I just had no attachment to it and it was a value, then I wouldn't be doing this. I certainly wouldn't be doing podcasts for free. That's for sure. Spending my time. This is fun. I enjoy the heck out of learning about all the different cards. And I love seeing new people come into the hobby space and learn more about it and want to know and all that stuff. So
yep.
Good question.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, and the last thing I'll say, just kind of close it out, is I think, you know, kind of pre-COVID, there was a whole lot less speculation than there is now on future value. You know, if I buy this for X, it's going to be worth Y, or I think it should be worth Y. And I think there'd be a lot less speculation. But the other thing, just kind of to reiterate the point about, you know, you have to ride the wave. There's several cards I bought during the COVID era that, yeah, the cards that I had that I bought or traded into, for example, during the COVID era, you know, that like essentially they were all high, right? And so the cards I was trading for were valued at higher, which then I was getting into that card that was valued at probably higher than what it's worth today. But everything kind of went down in parallel in a sense, except the stuff I feel like that I traded, in most cases, not all, it probably declined at a much more rapid rate than the card that I was trading into. And so that makes you feel better about, you know, just knowing that you're getting into the right cards. And sometimes those cards that become available, it doesn't matter what the rest of the market is doing, right? We talked about last week, there is a Peyton Manning card that doubled in price from 2021 to 2024, while the rest of the market has probably, you know, in many cases has been cut in half, right? And so there's just certain cards that really buck trends, and there's certain cards that are true like collector cards, and it really doesn't matter what's going on, whether it's COVID or something else around the market. When those things become available, they sell for the price that they sell for because, you know, it's a card that folks want. So,
well, and I guess I'll end it with this. Like, I think I've kept track of every dime I've spent on everything since that very first card I bought, based off of net numbers, gross numbers versus what I've spent, what I've sold, all of it, every dime. So I know exactly how much I'm into everything. And it's funny because I don't think anybody really calculates up the last 6 years of your auxiliary spending, you know, just whether it be whatever you do, any money you spend on yourself, you know, because I limited what I spend on myself to just this, because it's just like my thing I do. And if you look at that number, you're like, okay, if you spread that out over 6 years, it's not so bad. You know, we divvy it out based on what it's worth. It's crazy. I've actually been able to push into, you know, based off of alt values, because some of my cards are hard to find a card value. And last sales are tough, right? And some of them, you know, I'm about 13, 15% return on investment based off the last sale of some of these cards. And I use some of the offers I've been getting for some of the cards too that I have as a strengthening of the case of, like, I know I could sell 5 or 6 of them at definitely more than what I paid because of the demand for that particular card. And obviously I don't want to sell it. I love those cards. But so when you have that kind of a collection, those kind of cards, I think a lot of folks, hopefully, there's a lot of people that do and some people that don't. But people just enjoy their cars. They don't really care. Unless you got into it early and bought all those cars and you're in a considerable profit now, just because it's still so much higher. I still feel good, even though I went through the whole journey. I still made it out okay. So I guess that's a sign that you can, if you just, depends on what you collect, obviously. But yeah, and I'm lucky because I collect Griffey, and he's got a pretty good fan base and collector base. So anyway, yeah,
love it. Spoken like a true banker, keeping track of every dime you spend. I love it. All right, so the next topic is from at upstate_sports_cards. And this topic said around behavior comps and how the market fixates so much on what a card last sold for. And if when that card sold, was it in a collector's collection? Was it in a flipper's collection? Like what the previous owner of that card, like who that was. And if it was in a collector's collection, then maybe it shouldn't have sold as frequently. And he further comments that it makes you think that cards aren't really all that rare and we're being sold more of a folk story. So what do you think of that?
Well, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna call out my buddy Cage Lawyer, and I'm gonna call out my buddy Nick, War Sports. because they both kind of, I think they both tie into this, and they've both made comments recently that kind of tie into this question a little bit. They made comments about how if these cards keep selling all the times, when are they going to finally land into a collector's hands? And Nick's comment is like, if it sells too much, is it a true collector card? I think both comments have validity, and it's interesting though when you tie them together and you think about why people are selling cards. I'll just answer with my own experience. When I'm selling, it's usually because I'm trying to get something. It doesn't mean I want. And when I buy that card, there's a lot of me. There's a big part of me that goes, I'm going to keep this for a while, or maybe for a long, long time. Then all of a sudden, this like amazing card comes available, and now I'm like, well, dang it. I gotta take advantage of this opportunity and get into this really great card that I've wanted for a long time. I just, the price points right, whatever it is. So now I need to consolidate. I need to sell. So sometimes I'm doing that, and that's one of the reasons why I do that. Now there is a little bit of back and forth, change my mind, repositioning, and I do that. I'll admit I definitely do that, and and Gage knows that because he knows me well. Nick's getting to know me well. He knows that now. But it's a lot of times it's just to move into these different cards that are coming available. It's just kind of part of the process. I don't know how many people do that. There are some people that probably just, I buy it, I hold it, I never sell. I was joking around earlier on Facebook, on Instagram about that. Buy a card, never sell it, and that's it. Never sell it. Once you buy it, you're done. You can never sell it. Kind of, which would be scary because it'd probably kill someone like me with the way I do it. But I think that would be really hard for me to do. But I do believe, okay, does my behavior doing that, what effect does that have on the hobby? That is a good question, because does it affect the hobby? Does it affect that player's market when I'm selling some of these nicer cards? Now, I usually go to the to the collectors group on Facebook first to try to move a card, or I'll go to maybe no recent comps, or there's different places where you can talk to people. Go, hey, would you want to buy this? Are you interested in this? Before I would auction it. Auction's like the last step in moving it. So a lot of times, if some of these major collectors are moving cards, they're moving them privately within collector communities, and nobody really knows how often these cards are really selling. That goes to the point that Nick was making. There's been all this time between sales, but has there? Because they're just not recorded. They're not recorded sales. And again, I love Nick, I love Cage. It's just they bring up interesting points, and it kind of all ties in. So if these cards aren't selling very often, are they truly just not selling often because they're that rare? Or have they passed hands because now they've moved on to somebody else and that person's going to wait for a while? Like that Peyton Manning you and I talked about. I sold it to Nick. Now Nick's probably going to sit on it for a while and give it some time before he sells it. That's his decision because he might want to keep it. Who knows? But that is a card that won't sell for a while. That's only because I decided to sell it to him privately and not auction it off so close together based off my silly behavior when I always want to buy and sell and move and all that stuff. Maybe emotional buying, whatever we talked about. Cage just talked about that before. Anyway, the point is, I think that it can affect the market, but it also can manipulate the market in a way if you feel like these cards aren't selling very often because private sales are happening and people aren't marking those private sales down. There's no way of tracking. So yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think there's kind of two different things that I pulled out similar to what you said that I kind of pulled out from his points. And I think the first one is around how people fixate so much on what a card last sold for whenever they're trying to price it out. And I think it's reasonable to do that. I mean, that's something that I do. It's something you do like when you go to buy a house or, something like that. You look at the comps of similar homes and, things like that. That's reasonable to do. But I think if as a hobby and a market, if we just fixate solely on, well, this card sold for, $1,000, and if you were to sell it again for $1,000, then eBay or whatever auction house is gonna eat all these fees and this sort of stuff. So you need to sell it to me for $900, right? And then you buy it for $900, and so it's just kind of that sinking ship, right? And so if it's a rare, scarce card, just because that card sold for, and we kind of talked about this last week, just because that card sold for $1,000, that means that's the most that somebody at the time that card went to a public auction or, was listed publicly on a marketplace. That's the most that somebody wanted to pay for it. So that's what it was worth at that moment in time. So if enough time elapses, again, maybe you get more buyers come in, maybe somebody who's a collector of that who missed it the first time, they come in and they see it, they want to pay more for that card because it's worth more to them. And so I think it's something that it's kind of something you have to learn through your time in the hobby about, yeah, like comp is one data point, and you can go to Card Ladder or whatever and kind of use that as a data point, but that can't be the whole thing that you base your decision on, what your offer for a card is, especially if it's a card that's super rare, like a one of one, or a card that hasn't sold in 3 to 5 years, because I find that a lot, say like with Peyton Manning. I'll go back to him a lot because I collect him very heavily. If I go to Card Ladder and I look up a Peyton Manning card that hadn't sold in 5 years, based on Peyton's index and Card Ladder, which there's not a lot of Peyton cards that are tracked in Card Ladder, it may say, hey, that card is only worth 50% of that value now, right, of the last sale, which we know is not true. And so that could lead somebody down the wrong direction. So I think it's important to use data to help kind of get you going in one direction, but that can't be the only thing that you use to determine like what is a good price to pay for a rare and scarce type of card.
I feel like you make great. That's a great point. Let me piggyback on that. Let me jump on it. I think that the Card Ladder data is really great for
liquid
and market movers. Any one of you guys want to use that data is great for liquid cards that sell all the time. If it's a card that's moving a lot, that data is terrific because it kind of gives you moments. There's a lot of plot points for that, right? It's not like once in 2014, once in 2020, and once in 2022. There's 3, and you're like, okay, how do I put those together? I mean, those are big moments in time. There's inflation. I mean, everything's changed. I think there's just certain cards that just, you're right, comps they don't really do anything. It's basically how much are you willing to pay for that card because it's that much in demand, and that's a card. It's a card that so many people want for that particular player, and those cards, the collectors that holds it calls their shot.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to pay what they want. This is leading into a classic Drake question on the crossover. Holding the card and making sure you're going to have to pay what I want. But this guy has a ridiculous price. This makes no sense. But he owns it, and he sort of like just holds it hostage on a guy or a gal, and you can't buy it. So it kind of leans into that question that I had about whether if you get a deal on a card, are you obligated to report that data point? I feel like with some of these, and the reason I asked that question on the cross was because Chris and I were actually talking about that offline, and he made that very clear. He's like, I think it's really a privacy thing. It's up to the collector if they want to report that. You happily take it and put it in if it's obviously authenticated, but you don't have to. There's a part of me goes, well, if I got a really good deal on this card, I kind of want to keep that, I want that last comp to be this number, and I want to be down here, and I want to have that instant equity built into it. But then at the same time, it's like, yeah, but there's going to be other private sales of that card that who knows what it's going to be. And so it is a very interesting topic because I think it all comes back to money and value. And we all say, oh, we're collectors and we don't care about that. Yes, we do. We care about that a lot. We definitely do. We care about how much we spend on it. We care about how much it's going to be worth. A good store of value later would be great. We don't want it to be worth nothing. If you go back to pre-COVID prices, it still wasn't zero. So,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all great points. And the last thing that I'll take from the hobby topic from Mr. Upstate Sports Cards is it's interesting. It's something I think about a lot. If a hardcore collector is selling a card and you collect that similar player, the way I took his topic is, does that make that card any less desirable to you? Does that make sense? So like, for example, I'm in a Peyton Manning group chat, and if someone offers a Peyton Manning card for sale, even though it may be rare and scarce, the thought goes through my mind is like, well, if they don't want it, then why should I? Right. Ooh. And it's an interesting thing to think about. And I've talked to Josh Johnson about this before, and I think I brought it up on the crossover, is like, if he's after certain LeBron James cards, and I always wonder is if, him selling it, does the person selling it, does that have any impact on his want or desire for the card at all? And I wonder about that a lot. And and I just use Josh as an example, but it would just be like, if and I can't think of any like hardcore LeBron collectors. I think there's one, his name is like at Kimmy NG, and there's another one, Bob M Track or something like that, that have some phenomenal LeBron cards. And if one day they decided to sell their LeBron collection, there'd be a lot of people after it. But there would certainly be people that would scratch their heads going like, man, like, why is this guy selling this card or that collection? Right.
I think it's a good point, but I think there's different reasons. I'll go back. There's different reasons why people are selling some of these cards. Like, I know for a fact that some of these cards that I've sold in the past, I've went and got back because I wanted them back. I just needed to use them as capital to get another card, and I was able to make something on this card while I colored up. I got a little extra, so I was able to go back and grab it, and I got it back. There's been a couple cards like that. There are cards that I go back and forth on trying to move, and I don't want to move it. And and there's some I have to move, and I'm like, gosh, a perfect world, like I'd love to keep them all, right? But I can't because I'm not going to spend that cash. So sometimes they're just selling them because they have to.
Yeah.
They need it. They need the money for whatever, for a personal reason, for their family, or maybe they're trying to buy another card. There's, most of the time people are saving up to buy another card, which is a good thing, right? It's a good sign. That just keeps feeding the hobby, right? They're just taking it out because they don't want to collect anymore. You're right. But you have to trust that that's not happening. Maybe that is happening. But then that's understanding I think that's understanding your collector base. I think Josh and you understand Peyton Manning and LeBron James's market. So you know what cards are desirable, what cards aren't. I know what cards are desirable in the Griffey market. I know what cards I have in my collection that people want to buy from me. I know what they are now. And those are probably the cards I don't want to sell because they're the ones that people want. And there's probably a couple that people, David Robinson. I love David Robinson. The market's not that big. He's harder to sell. People aren't jumping at him. But there's people that would love to buy a couple of the Kobe's I have, and they would love to buy about 5 or 6 of the Griffeys I have, and I'm very grateful to have them. So what cards are important. Maybe you have to move one of them because, hey, life happens, something happens, or you want to combine it and just have this one big card. You have to let it go because that's what you're going to have to do. And it doesn't make the card less desirable. It just means you had to move it for that particular reason. It just all comes up. What's the reason for the moving of the card and selling of the card? So that's my counterpoint to your point. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. I love it. Yeah, it just is something I think that makes you think sometimes. It's like, and I've seen it in other instances, right? And especially with content creation, right? Somebody gets on and they talk about, a bunch of Michael Jordan cards, and the next thing you know, you see all these Michael Jordan cards come for sale, or somebody, or like Brett, for example. Brett talked about wrestling Galactics, and then next thing you know, he was selling some Galactics, and so people were like, "Wait, hang on, what's the connection here?" And we both know that Brett's a great collector, and that was not his motivation at all. But it's like some people's perception from the outside is like, "Wait, what's this person's motivation when they appear to be a collector of this player, of this set, parallel, insert, whatever?" So anyways, it's just something to think about.
We're collectors. We change our minds all
the time.
Everybody I used to feel bad about it. I don't feel bad about it anymore. Anybody who wants to give anybody a hard time for selling cards, I understand if you're talking about this, if we're talking about this like here and like next week, I'm selling all my cards because I don't want to collect anymore. Not a life event. Nothing serious like that. That all takes precedence. But if I'm just like, I want to go buy another car or something, I'm going to sell all my cards. There's some hypocrisy there, right? I get that. Are you a collector or are you not? Are you into this or you're not? Changing your mind because you want to keep buying different cards and then coloring up or consolidating and then unconsolidating and then consolidating again. And that's just being a collector, man. Everybody does that. That's all I see. That's not, whatever. Everybody does it differently.
Absolutely.
Some people they do it different. It's cool. Then we all do it different. Whatever. It's all good.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. So next topic. This was one that I kind of brought up, and this was kind of mentioned on the crossover last week. So, and this should be a fairly quick one for us to discuss, and it's the vintage versus modern debate in a little bit. So when you look at vintage cards, they're largely separated by eye appeal, which lends itself to grade, right? But like, for example, Dr. J just has one rookie card. He doesn't have 1,000 rookie cards. The 52 Mantle is the card, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lou Alcindor, he's got this 69 Topps Tall Boy, and so on and so forth. But only the difference in there is around grade and eye appeal. But then when you get into modern, right, there's kind of three things that Josh and Chris were talking about last week that kind of separate modern cards. And it's rarity, so like manufactured rarity, which is numbering and things like that, or super short print. Brand, so things like Panini Prism, Select, to Chronicles, to Topps Chrome, all the different brands, and then to design of the card. And so I guess my question for you is, if you had to rank those three things for modern cards, 1, 2, 3, in terms of what you look for when you're looking to acquire a card for your collection, rarity, brand, and design, what's most important to, we won't say least important, but lesser importance for you?
Great question. Modern cards are tough because there's so many of them, and they're so unknown. You just don't know. So I have 2 modern cards. Show them to you right here. It might as well. So I have a Ronnie Mauricio Gold Refractor BGS 9510 out of 50, Bowman Chrome, first Bowman Chrome. And I got, of course, I'm a Mariner guy. Seattle here, I got Lazaro Montez's Blue Refractor PSA 10 auto. Now, that's out of 150. Those are the only 2 modern cards I used to have a lot more. So for me, I look at this card, I go brand first, Bowman Chrome. Rarity, out of 150 blue, it's in demand. So that rarity and brand kind of come together for this one because blue refractors are important. People seek those out for these particular cards. Gold first. And then after that is design. I don't really, whatever. They all kind of look different, but to me, for modern, that's the last thing I care about. If we're talking about 90s, I think rarity and design would fight with each other because I love the designs of 90s. But for modern, I would probably start with brand and then the rarity and then the design.
Yep. And I would agree with you 100%. So we're not going to disagree on this one. It's we're kind of we're straight chalk on this one. It's like you think of things like with Panini Prism, like Prism is the brand. And I think anytime those cards are released, whether it's for me, it's wrestling or football or whatever, I instantly gravitate to those cards. And then I love the golds, because they're out of 10. And so then you get that rarity aspect of it. And then the design, right? I look at, for example, I've got my Peyton Manning 2012 to 2015 Panini Prism Gold run. And there's certain years of that I like the design better than others, but it's still a Prism Gold of a player that I collect. And so I choose to collect it primarily more because of those first 2 reasons. I collect the brand and then I collect for the rarity. And then the design to me is a little bit lesser important, although I don't want to collect an ugly card. There's been some ugly wrestling cards, I'll say, that have come out, and I look at that and I'm like, that may be a 101, but I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and there are some modern cards that they're pretty cool looking. I think there's some of the newer. They're trying to up their game. I mean, I would say more Topps more than Panini, but you talk about those National Treasures and Flawless. Those designs are beautiful. Like there's awesome cards. So there's some really cool modern cards out there. If you're going to spend some money, I guess you got to spend some money on some of those. But yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is you wonder if that evolves over time, right? And I think back, right? The whole PMG reds and greens, they weren't coveted the way they are today 25 years ago, right?
Exactly.
So it makes me wonder, 25 years from today on March 12th, 2049, are people still, coveting, I guess is the best word I can think of, even though we're not supposed to do it, these, Prism Golds and blacks and National Treasures and, Flawless cards, which are probably the most in-demand ultra-modern cards today. Are they still the most in-demand cards? Or is it another set that today is largely, cast aside? Because again, as we just spoke of, brand is king today. And so you wonder if that changes over time, just like things change all the time. Right? Like we talked last week, BGS used to be who everybody graded with. And I think somebody commented and said people used to crack PSA 10s to send to BGS so they could get a 9.5.
That's what they wanted. Yeah, no, and that was obviously well before I was doing it. So I wasn't around for that. I get that. And I mean, I'll since you just said that, I'll pick out a comment here from the last, just like segueing beautifully here. It was from Malia Chapman, 7162. She goes, "Love your, appreciate content. But do you think you became a PSA guy when you got back into the hobby? Why do you think you did?" I would guess because you're influenced by what everybody else is into. The first card I bought, Malia, was a BGS card because I was told by a collector locally that I knew that there's BGS, there's PSA, and I just went for the cheapest one. And BGS happened to be cheaper than PSA. And I didn't really know much about PSA, so I had no idea when I first started buying some of these cards. I had no clue. I was buying 1980s cards and PSA 9s because I'm like, well, these are way cheaper than these PSA 10s. And then I was reading in some places like there's not that much of a difference. Just look at the card. So I was like, well, why would I pay all this money for a 10 and not a 9? I didn't know about pops. I wasn't thinking about that. But yes, I was influenced back then. And so, but that's when, PSA 10s at that point were still more popular than BGS 9s, 9.5s. But in the past, that wasn't the case. I think, coming back to your question, I don't think rarity is going to be a factor for modern cards in the future. There's just there's too much manufactured rarity. The true rarity, like the gold prisms, maybe those, but the one-of-ones, there's so many one-of-ones. Those are, you have the one-of-one masterpieces from the 90s. Like, those are one-of-ones. You might have super fractors from the 2000s, from Topps Chrome and Bowman, Topps Chrome and Bowman's Best and Finest. Those are a little bit more, but even then, they started, stepping it up and producing more. Modern one-of-ones, there's so many of them. So rarity, I think I don't think there is rarity with modern cards. I think that's an oxymoron. Modern cards, rarity. I think it's brand and design. And you're right. I think you're right. Design is what's going to probably lead the way, and brand first and foremost. And then you're going to drill it down to the player, and then the type of card that everybody's looking for, like what kind of gold refractor, right? Everybody's going to head for that. The finite one-of-one, maybe that's the one that kind of becomes the one-of-one that everybody goes, yep. Yeah, but there isn't going to be much, man. It's going to be a couple of cards and then everything else, in my opinion, which I don't know if that's a bad thing, though. I feel like that takes away all the uppityness of the hobby that, I know I'm guilty of all the time. Like, oh, it's not that card. Well, it's not that card. I can't have that. It has to be check all these things. And I find myself kind of being snobby about it, to be honest. So maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yep. I love it. Well, Dennis, I've got a whole sheet of topics, but I think we should probably save it for next time. We've hit on a lot during this episode. So yeah, if you want to bring us home, go for it.
Let's do it. Yeah, definitely. Thanks everybody for listening to us talk about all this stuff for another 40 minutes. We try to keep it shorter just because it makes it a little bit easier for you guys to digest and for topics to be more clear in the comment section. Instead of having 15 different topics, we can have just a few we can all chat about. Hopefully we sparked some inspiration, and there's an impetus for some more conversations about all the things we're talking about. Again, Drake and I love having you on here. A comment below. We need those comments. Those comments are important. I know we only grabbed a couple of them or one of them today, but we may grab more in the future, so please engage. It's so much fun. Like, subscribe. Go follow Drake. Come follow me if you'd like, and subscribe to Dustin's channel. You got my channel, Melted Wax, as well. Anyway, we enjoyed talking to you. Drake, travel safe. Get home safe. I mean, are you driving or are you flying?
I'm just driving. So it's a short trip for me.
Windshield time, lots of content opportunity for you to just slip into one of those 2 or 3 hour, shows and just fill your head with more card stuff and more inspiration for our next episode.
Absolutely. That's my plan.
All right, guys. Hey, everybody, have a great rest of your week or your weekend. You're going to be hearing this on Saturday. Enjoy yourselves. Be safe. Have fun collecting. Have fun buying. We will see you guys next week right here on the Pick 6 podcast. Take care, everybody.